Right, good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's English First Additional Language lesson. My name is Elizabeth Meyer, and this lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with the Saibona Discovery Centre. Welcome. I'm sure you're excited for the prelim exams that's around the corner. And this is why I'm here today, to focus on your prelim exams, especially paper 1. We have so much to share, so I hope you have a pen and paper ready. Let's do this. If you look at your paper 1, you will know that you have section A, that is your comprehension for 30 marks, your summary for section B for 10 marks, and then your section C, language. Now, your language consists of your advertisement, a cartoon, and obviously that language paper. Question 5. So where do you start? Please remember that you have 10 minutes reading time before the actual exam starts. So please use your time effectively. Read your comprehension, read your summary, and study the advertisement and the cartoon. Now, I would like to start today with question 2, section B, the summary. And I'm sure you'd wonder, why? Well, it's easy. The summary is exactly the same every time. It's just the article that differs. So why don't you start your paper 1 with a summary? It's probably the easiest part of the paper in any case. So let's look at the instructions. Now, you have to read the instructions very carefully. The main aim of your summary is to take a large chunk of text, the article, and to reduce it to the main ideas. Now, please remember, your summary must be written in point form. In other words, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, no hearts and dashes and dots. Point form, please. Now remember, we need 7 points and you only have 70 words to complete it in. And yes, we do count. So don't lie. We know exactly how many words there are. Please remember to number your sentences 1 to 7. Remember, only the first 7 will be marked. So if you have 8 sentences, unfortunately, it's a waste. We're only marking the first 7. Only 1 fact per sentence is allowed. So please don't include more than 1 fact. And probably this is the most difficult part. You need to try and write it in your own words as far as possible. Please remember to count your words and write at the end of your summary the final number of words. But I promise you, we will count it. Right, so how do you put everything into practice? Well, it's easy. You first need to identify exactly what you need to summarize. Please write the topic in bold, big letters on top of your planning so that you can be reminded of a topic every time you look at it. Read the topic before you read every sentence to make sure that your sentence that you are choosing corresponds with the topic. Please remember to do a rough draft. But most important, you have to draw a line through your rough draft. We will only be marking the final. I'm sure by now you can remember the steps to writing a summary, but let me remind you again. Step number 1 was to delete. Then we're keeping some sentences. We're going to substitute. We will list, and then we'll write our final summary. So let's run through the steps in more detail. Number 1, delete. delete all those sentences that are not relevant to the topic. You can do it on the question paper. Just draw a line through them. Number 2, you need to read the passage again and decide on which sentences you will be keeping in this case. That's step number 2. Step number 3, try to substitute some words or replace a word with a synonym. If you can, change it into passive voice. Step number 4, you need to list your sentences. And then you're ready for the final. Write that final summary. Oh, and remember to count your words. Now, let's quickly go to question 3. Your advertisement. Now remember, this one counts 10 marks. But by now you should know that the same type of questions are often asked. And I'm sure by now you are an expert on it. Now, the AIDA principle is used for every advertisement. And as an expert, you need to know exactly how they're manipulating us readers to buy the product. A stands for attention. They want to grab your attention. So how do they do it? Well, they're going to use bold prints, different font, interesting pictures, maybe an unusual layout, a celebrity or two. So be on the lookout for the way they're trying to catch your attention. When you see the advertisement for the first time, try to figure out what caught my attention and why. Right. So they have your attention. What's next? Well, obviously, they want to keep your interest. And this is where the text comes into play. If you read the small text at the bottom of the advertisement, you're going to see they're going to include a lot of promises, facts, anything to persuade you that their product is the best. Now, the next thing they will do is to create a desire. That means to persuade you that you actually need the product. Now you have to look at the words and specifically what type of words are used. Is it persuasive? Is it emotional? How are they trying to get you to realize that this product is the one you can't live without? And then most important is of course the A for action. They want you to buy the product. They want their money, honey. So make sure you look at how easy they're doing it to get you to buy this. Maybe there's a contact number or a website address. Or maybe you just need to swipe right. Now, obviously, there's a lot of terminology you need to know when studying advertisements. So let's remind you quickly. Your headline is the line on top of your page. It's usually written in bold font, different colors are used. It will stand out and catch your attention. That's called a headline. The copy text is a small text on the advertisement, usually at the bottom of the advertisement. In this case, it's underneath the headline. There will always be a website or contact details included in the advertisement. Images are important. Remember, they are trying to sell a product. In this case, they've included the product for us. Why? So that you can see it, so that you'll be able to recognize it in a shop and obviously buy it. There's your product. This is one of the questions we love to ask you in the exam. What is the product that's being sold? Please remember to be specific. Slogan, do you remember that? That small catchy rhyme that gets stuck in your head. Now remember, Coca-Cola's one is open happiness. And what's left then? That's the company. Remember, we can't ask you in the exam who is the advertiser of this product. So before you start with the questions, always take a minute or two to analyze the advertisement and make sure you know exactly what's going on there. Font means the type of text they've used. Now, if you just look at this advertisement on the screen, you'll see Coke is written in a different font and in red letters. Immediately, it catches your attention. Oh, we love asking you who's the target audience of the advertisement. Now, the target audience is the group of people who's most probably going to buy this product. Please remember to be specific. You can't just say people. In this case, you'll have to say people who like Coke. Now let's look at a few typical questions that we love asking you. I love this advertisement. Smile with strength. First question, who is the advertiser? And that's obviously Colgate. Next one, what's the product? Now I know you can't see so clearly, but be very specific when you see this one. It looks like toothpaste, but in your picture, when you get it in the exam, it will be much clearer and you will be able to tell us exactly what the product is. Who's the target audience? Right, in this case, it would be anyone who wants their smile to be as white, bright, and as strong as the lady in the advertisement. We love asking you to identify the logo and the slogan. Now remember, if we ask you to identify the logo, please don't redraw the logo for us. Explain it in your own words. What are the visuals that are being used? In this case, I need you to pretend the person marking your paper cannot see the advertisement. So you need to tell me everything you see. You need to tell me that there's a lady and she has seemed like a bandage stuck in her teeth and she's pulling on it. And obviously her teeth is quite strong if she can do that. And you can look at her eyes, she looks determined. So you have to be very specific in your description of the visuals. What persuasive language is used? Now if you look at the words, at the bottom it says 4 times better. Not 3 times, but 4 times better. Can you see that's a way to persuade you? Here's some more. Here we have grow your business. Let's see. In this case, after you've recognized the persuasive words and the visuals, you need to find the link between them. In other words, how do they fit together? Now, in this case, it says, we provide great ideas. Well, if you look at the lady, you'll see she's thinking, I have an idea or project. And she looks like she has one, with her fingers standing up. Can you see how it's linked together? To give the impression that this company will most surely help you. Are there contact details? Maybe there's social media logos. And in this case, we have a telephone number, it seems, and we have a website. Now, an obviously question is, why would they want to include all these details? Well, there's a number of reasons. For you to find information, for you to complain? Did you ever think about that? And maybe in the third place, to order something. So if we were to ask you the reasons for including all of these contact details, please look at your mark allocation, that you know exactly how much you need to say. Here it is. How can you get more information about the product? Well, it's easy. There's a telephone number. There's even a website. And it says, you'll see there, it says, contact us. It's almost like an invitation to say, oh, we're ready for you. Just come and visit. Now, one of our favorite questions we love asking is whether the advertisement is effective. Now, we can ask you, is the message of the advertisement effective? Or does this advertisement make you want to buy the product? Now, usually we would ask you to discuss your answer. Now, please remember, if you have a question like that, you need to give us a number of information. Now, how do you do this? Please study your advertisement. Look at it carefully. Now, you either have to agree with the statement or you need to disagree. But you need to tell us exactly which one. And then, in your answer, refer specifically to the images or the pictures, the words, and the final message of the advertisement. So please make sure that when you answer this open-ended question, you cover all three things. Let me remind you again. The picture, the words, and the message. If you do that, I promise you will get your 3 marks easily. Let's move over to question 4, your cartoon. Again, there's terminology involved, things that you need to know. So the first one is setting. If we ask you about the setting of a cartoon, we are asking you actually where and when is it taking place. It's the same as the literature question. Where and when. Now, facial expressions obviously mean your facial expressions, but you have to remember to describe them in detail. Oh, be careful for body language. It's a terminology that we will use, but I want to say you can't use it. You can't just say the body language shows that he's angry. You have to go into detail. So what do you look at? Well, it's easy. Look at the hands. Look at the feet. Look at the body posture. Look at gestures that are made. So be very specific when answering questions about body language. Language can either be formal or informal. Very important. We'll be using a term called visual clues. Now, visual clues is what you can see. In other words, the words. Verbal clues mean the words and visual refer to the pictures. Please make sure you're able to discern between the two. But I'll help you. Let me show you. So let's analyze it. This is my favorite cartoon. Look, I know it's probably none of my business, and I realize this is just my opinion, but it makes me crazy to see the way you organize your study area. What makes you crazy? What about it makes you crazy? Now, let's analyze it. We're looking at the visual clues, in other words, the picture. In this case, we are able to identify the setting. It's obviously in Jeremy's study. You can see there's a computer, there's a desk, there's some books, there's a lot of other things that shouldn't be there, but it's a study. And the characters? Well, that's obviously Jeremy and Mom. Can you see we're just looking at our picture and it's really easy to analyze it. Now let's look at the body language and facial expressions. In your first picture, where Mom says, "Look, I know it's probably none of my business," you'll see that her hand is on top of her chest. Her eyes are closed. Her mouth is quite open. In the second picture, she is pointing to something. Her mouth is open, her eyes are open as well. But look at the third picture. She has a hand in her hair. Eyes are closed, mouth wide open. Can you see how you have to explain to us exactly what you see? I say again, pretend the person marking is unable to see what you're seeing. So be specific. Now, let's look at your verbal clues. Look at font, capital letters, punctuation in your words. Now, if you just look at the cartoon, Mom's word, you will see the font changes the more she talks. And obviously, in the last one, you'll see that the font is quite big in capital letters with an exclamation mark. She is obviously saying this louder as she's going on. So be on the watch out for things like that. Note that there is an exclamation mark. It's almost like she's shouting. And obviously look at the words. She's trying to be nice to Jerry. It's none of my business. It's just my opinion, but. And then Jeremy doesn't understand. He just says, "What about it makes you crazy?" I mean, there's no way that he can understand why his mom is feeling the way she does. Look at the picture of Mom when Jeremy says, "What about makes you crazy?" Can you see? Shoulders are slumped, looking down. She knows she's not going to win this fight. Now, something you need to look out for is what we call movement lines. Obviously, the cartoonist wants to show movement, and the best way to do it is using movement lines. Now, remember, they can be diagonally, vertical, in any direction, basically. And obviously, it shows movement. The more lines there are, the quicker it goes. So, let me just show you what I mean. Look at frame number 5, where Jeremy is going down the stairs on his chair. Can you see all those little movement lines? That obviously suggests that he's jumping from stair to stair. And look at the second last one. Can you see how fast he's going there in a circle? It's because of all those movement lines. Right. So be on the lookout for them as well. Sound effects. The cartoonist can't put sound effects in his cartoon, but there's another way for him to do it, or her. They use what we call onomatopoeia, or sound imitation. You find it in poetry as well and in your literature. In other words, words are used to create a sound. Now, if you look at this cartoon, we have Jeremy's girlfriend, and they're obviously going to kiss, you can see that. See you tomorrow. Call me later, and then psht. That's obviously the sound effect. And you can see the difference, and this is a lovely question to ask in the exam for contrast. Contrast between, obviously, frame 1 and frame 3. Now, can you see the contrast? Eyes are closed, lips are moving forward. But in frame 3, the hair is standing up, eyes are big, mouths wide open. So, Jeremy says, "Were you just eating a Mentos? Is that Diet Coke?" And obviously when Mentos and Diet Coke glides, then you have a very interesting sensation. But please don't try this at home. But the sound effect, psh, is the sound that one makes when Diet Coke and Mentos come together. Right, now let's go over to humor. Let's look at this cartoon. Jeremy, will you hand me my purse? And we can see Mom's busy working. Sure. Now, interesting. Instead of him just handing her her purse, he takes a picture. And Mom says, what are you doing? And Jeremy says, the next time you yell at me to clean my room, I'm showing you this picture. So you can imagine what Mom's purse is looking like. Now, this is what we call irony. Irony is when we expect one thing, but we get something else. Now, when you have to answer an irony question, always remember to include the word but. And please tell me what you expected, but what you got. So let's tackle this cartoon. Jerry's mom complains about his room. Remember that cartoon we looked at? So this is obviously something that happens often. So Jerry's mom complains about his room. But her handbag is such a mess too. And that is why Jeremy is saying to her, you can't complain about my room anymore. Look at your handbag. Can you see that irony? We expect Jeremy to clean his room, but Mom's handbag is such a mess. Right. Let's go on to the next one. So, what are the important tips I can give you? Before you start with the question, study your cartoon first. Look before looking at the questions. Analyze it for yourself, exactly like we've done it now. Read your questions carefully. We will often ask you to refer to a specific frame. Please make sure you look at that specific frame. And once again, I know I've told you this before, but I'm saying it again. Pretend the examiner cannot see the cartoon. Tell us everything. Now, let's get to question 5. Question 5 counts 20 marks. And I know sometimes you might feel that this is the most difficult part of the paper. But I promise you, it's going to be easy. Now, remember, question 5 is divided into 2 parts. You'll have a prose text, a short text that you have to read, and a visual text of some sort. Now, your first question is that dreaded question where you have to identify errors and you only have to write down the answer. Now, I have some tips for you. Please remember, there is only one error per sentence. Remember to correct the error and write down only the corrected answer. In other words, you don't have to rewrite the sentence. We don't want you to do that. We only want the answer. Now, the best way to do this is to practice reading it in your mind and listening to yourself. Does something sound strange or incorrect? It's probably that error you're looking for. Now, I'm not allowed to tell you, but there are a number of things that usually pop up in these sentences. And if you know the list, it's easier to know what you're looking for. Spelling. There's always a spelling mistake. There might be an apostrophe that's used incorrectly or not used at all. Concord. Does your object and your verb agree with each other? For example, the boy eats. There must be an S because it's singular. That's what we mean. Sometimes we include words that are often confused, like two, and two. T-O, T-O-O, T-W-O. So words that are often confusing. We love including them, so be on the lookout for them. We might use the incorrect preposition, or we'd make a tense mistake. So now that you have a list of things to look for, I'm sure it's going to make it so much easier to find that error. Do you notice? We will never ask you to correct a punctuation error. So don't worry about that. Let's see if you can do this. Correct the single error in each of the following sentences. I've given you 4 sentences. Let's see if you can get them right. I'll read them to you and you can hear, if you can hear, find that error. The Link Literacy Project are in need of volunteers. It is estimated that most South African children have lost learning time. A little effort will go the long way to helping children. She added, many of our children live in challenging environments. I'm sure you've picked it up as well. Let's run through them. So, in the first one, we had the subject verb, or what we call concord. The Link Literacy Project is singular, so it needs its verb in singular. So we can't use are, we need to have is. It is estimate, obviously it must be estimated, spelling. Or, you can see there's a tense mistake. A little effort will go a long way. And she added, many of our children live in challenging, obviously a spelling mistake. There you go. Can you see how easy it is, especially if you know what to look for? But reading it aloud, which you obviously can't do in the exam, but read it aloud in your mind, if that makes sense. Now, I'm going to run through a few things I know you know, but might have forgotten. So let's start with parts of speech. You need to know the different parts of speech off by heart. Now, I'm sure you know nouns. That's anything you can touch, see. Pronouns, they take the place of a noun, and we've got he and they and she and it. Verbs, that's your action words. They're easy to find. Articles, remember there are only 3 of them. A, an, or the. It's easy. Adjectives always describe your nouns. And then obviously your next one is your adverbs. And that always describes your verbs. Your prepositions is called your linking words. In, on, under, beneath, next to. Conjunctions, this is where we're joining sentences together. And then interjections. Wow, ouch, always that we find in cartoons perhaps. So, when you're asked to identify a part of speech, the easiest way is to find the verb first. And then, from there on, go to your noun and all the rest. Because then you'll be able to see whether it's an adjective describing the noun or an adverb describing the verb. Now, another thing that is sometimes quite confusing, I know, is active and passive voice. But again, I'm going to show you a recipe to do this easier. The first thing you need to do is underline the verb. Can you see how important it is to find the verb or verbs in your sentence? Now, let's look at my sentence. Khaleesi impressed the scouts at a youth tournament in Mossel Bay. Obviously, impressed is my verb. That was easy to find. Now, don't worry if a sentence is quite long. Just try to find the verb. Now you need to find the subject and the object. So who's doing it and to whom is it being done? So who or what impressed the scouts? It's easy. Khaleesi, of course. He's the subject, he's the doer. Did you see how I got to the subject? Let me do it again for you. I asked who or what plus the verb. And my answer then is the subject. And the object then? Who or what did subject, well, subject is Khaleesi, impress. And obviously, who did he impress? The scouts. And they are the object. So start with your verb, find your verb, and then ask yourself 2 easy questions to determine the subject and the object of your sentence. Now, I know we're going step by step through this, but this is the best way to do it in an exam as well. So, we know Khaleesi is our subject, our verb is impress, and our object is the scout. Yes, we have a whole rest of a sentence there. That's not important at this stage. Now, what happens now? In active and passive voice, the subject and the object changes places. And you can literally do this on your question paper. So we're going to start now with the scouts, and we're going to end with by Khaleesi. And we'll add the rest of at a youth tournament in Mossel Bay. Now the problem is usually with the verb. How do I change the verb? Do I need to change tenses? How do I do this? Well, most important, active and passive voice, you don't change the tense. In other words, we stick to the same tense. Now, on the screen, I've made it really easy for you to help you. Let's start with the present tense. He writes books. Books are written. Or if it was singular, we would have said, a book is written. The same for the past tense. He wrote books. Now we're going to use was or were. In this case, books are plural, so we have to say were written. And the future tense, he will write books. Books will be written. Can you see how easy that is? Now, if you look at the continuous tenses, past and present, you see the format looks a little bit different. Now remember, we have an ing there. He is writing books. We need to keep that ing in some way. And the best way to do that is by using being. B-E-I-N-G. So it's almost the same as the indefinite tense. Books are being written. So that being tells me it's continuous. It's taking place as we speak. And the same with the continuous past tense. He was writing books. Books were being written. Now at the perfect tense, we have to use, for present tense, we're going to use has or have, and then we're going to use been, B-E-E-N. So you just have to know this. In other words, basically it means you have to learn this. Right. He has written books. Books have been written. And in the past we'll say he had already written books. Books had already been written. Can you see how straightforward it is? So if you know this column, it is really going to help you. Make sure you don't change the tense. You stick to the same tense. We're just adding a few things. Right. Let's move over to question tags. Question tags is usually end of a statement. So why do we need a question tag? Well, a question tag means, is this true? Or do you agree? Now, here we work with positive and negative. Now, you have to remember positive and negative attracts. So if your sentence is positive, then your tag has to be negative. Let me give you an example. Kulisi was a player in Grey High School first rugby team. Can you see that's a positive sentence? So our tag has to be negative. Wasn't he? Let's try another one. Kulisi wasn't a player in the Grey High School first rugby team. Was he? Can you see how it works? Sentence is positive, your tag must be negative, and vice versa. It's as easy as that. Now, please remember, sometimes we will give you the question mark already there at the end of the tag. But be careful, we might be sneaky and not put it there. Now, please remember that you need to add a question mark at the end because you are asking a question. Now, indirect and reported speech. Now, direct speech are the words that are written, but when somebody else reports it, they use indirect or reported speech. It's almost like gossiping. Let's look at an example. Kulisi and Peter exclaimed, "We won the trophy this week." And you will then be asked to rewrite that into reported speech. Again, I have a whole set of steps that we need to follow. First one, always remove the inverted commas, exclamation, and question mark. In other words, all punctuation. Remove. Very, very important. Secondly, identify the pronouns and change them to he, she, or they. So step 1, punctuation. Step 2, change the pronouns. Let me give you an example here. Remember, this was our original sentence. Can you see we've got comma, we've got inverted commas, and an exclamation mark that we need to change. And we need to change we'll have to do something about the verb, and we'll have to do something about this week. Oh, here comes my arrow. It's a bit slow. Let's see. Let's see how we're going to change all these things. So the we is going to change to they. Verb, not quite sure about yet. And this becomes that. Now, this is like a maths puzzle. You have to do it step by step. Now, what about the verb? You need to change, in this case, it to the past tense. In other words, you have to go one step into the past. Change all the time words. Very, very important. Let me show you. Kulisi and Peter exclaimed that they had won the trophy that week. So when one step into the past becomes had won. Always remember it. So remember my picture here of a guy going one step into the past. This is different from the active and passive voice. In this case, we literally go one step into the past. So here I have a list to show you how it works. Eat becomes ate. Ate becomes had eaten. Is, am, and are becomes was and were. If you already have was and were, then it becomes had been. Has and have becomes had. Can you see how easy that it is? If you follow these steps, you can't go wrong. So very, very important that you follow it step by step to make sure that you change the verb into the past tense, and go back and make sure that all the words, time words, and everything are changed as required. Remember, be careful. We love including a time word for you. Right, I think we'll take a 5-minute break and then I'll be back with the rest of the language that we need to do. Hello and welcome back. We're revising paper 1 and I hope you're still with us. We're busy with question 5, language. Our next step is to combine sentences. Now, please remember, they will give you the conjunction to combine the sentences with. Read the instructions carefully. They might be specific as to which sentence you need to start with. Please remember, don't repeat words. Use the correct tense, be careful for that one, and make sure you apply the Concord rule. Now, learners often ask me, but when should I use a comma? Let me help you. So, if we have a conjunctions like after, before, if, since, while, although, and as soon as, that's when we need a comma. So your first sentence you will write down, and at the end of your first sentence you'll write a comma and then the second one. In other words, where the conjunction is used in the sentence, after that you'll use a comma. And on the screen I've got 2 examples. After we had talked on the phone, comma, I wrote down what we had decided. Before we left at 4 o'clock, comma, we had something to eat. So please remember these ones, that you need to include a comma when combining 2 sentences together using these conjunctions. Now, something you have to be careful for is the tenses. And I'd like to show you quickly how it works. So if we use after, the first tense or the first verb will take the perfect tense. Your second verb will use the indefinite tense. That's when we use after. But with before, it switches. Before, we will use the indefinite or the simple tense, and your second verb will then use the perfect tense. This is something you need to learn and make sure you can practice. Now, we love asking what we call conjunction pairs. But sometimes we're a bit sneaky and we only give you part of the conjunction pair or only the first pair part. Let's see. We love starting and telling you to start a sentence with either. But then we don't tell you that you need or as well. Neither nor. Not only, but also. These are what we call conjunction pairs, and they have to work together. Now, to make things even more trickier, there's a rule. And what's the rule? Now, if you have either or, neither nor, not only, but also, you have to look at the noun nearer to the verb. In other words, if we have a sentence like this one, neither Peter nor his sisters. Now, Peter is singular, sisters are plural. Which one do I use? Now, according to the rule, we're looking at the noun closest to the verb. And in this case, it is obviously sisters. And that's why we're doing the are going. Can you see how it works? Either or, neither or, not only, but also. Look at the noun closest to the verb. And that is a tense it's using. But if I have words like including, like, and as well as, the rule changes. Now I need to look at the first noun. Now we have exactly the same sentence. Peter, as well as his sisters. Now the rule says we look at the first noun. Peter is singular, and therefore we're going to use the is. Can you see the difference? The only way to remember is to know it off by heart. And you have to know it like a little parrot. It's as easy as that. But I promise you, if you know it, you'll remember it for life. Oh, the apostrophe. You'll remember that this is one of the options in the sentences in the beginning of question 5 where you have to identify an error. Now, I want you to please remember this t-shirt. An apostrophe does not make that word a plural. I promise. Very important. Now, apostrophes are used to show contraction or omission. In other words, we threw out a letter. Or it can show possession. In other words, that it belongs to someone or something. So let me give you an example. We have Sam's book. Or, let's see if we can find another one. The players' uniforms. Remember, it's more than one player. It's players and it's their uniforms. And that's why the apostrophe is after the S. I know we're going fast, but there's so much I'd like to share with you. Something you have to study is obviously your vocabulary. Synonyms, words similar in meaning, like big, tall, and high, or antonyms, words opposite in meaning, fat and thin, big and small, homophones, words that sound the same, but they are spelled differently and have different meanings. How do you remember all of this? Well, it's easy. Think of a homophone as a phone. Obviously, when I and you speak, the words might sound the same, but if we actually write them down, they're going to have different spelling and different meanings. That's the easiest way to remember that. Like week and week. Now, homonyms, on the other hand, spelled exactly the same. They are pronounced the same way, but they mean something different. Look at the word bark. I can say the bark is dry and brown. That's from a tree. Or the bark sails on the sea. It looks exactly the same, but obviously meaning is different. Now, obviously, one of the other things you have to remember is the difference between abbreviations and acronyms. Sure, we've given you a lot to remember. I hope you realize that for the first time you actually have to study for paper 1, and you just can't wing it in the exam. As I said when we started, it might be a good idea to start with question 2 first. Then do question 3, 4 and 5. And lastly, do question 1. Please remember that you have to manage your time very carefully, that you don't run out of time. But it makes sense to do question 1 last, as it is the longest part of your paper and it takes most of the time. Just make sure you leave enough time for yourself. So, what are the steps when I have to do my comprehension? Remember, you've got the 10 minutes reading time. In that time, you read the text. You looked at the title and the final paragraph. What I need you to do then next is go to the questions. Read the questions carefully. Then go back again to the text. Read again. But in this case, you'll have a pen in your hand. And then you can answer the questions. So let's go step by step through all the steps. As I said, read your passage during reading time. I need you to look at the title very carefully and figure out what it means. Remember, a lot of clues are left in the title. What is the text all about? I need you to get a good idea about the text. What happens in the text? When does it take place? Do you agree what the writer is saying? Read the final paragraph. Why was the text written? The writer obviously has a plan with this text. Try to figure out exactly what is his plan. Step number 2. Remember, now we're looking at the questions. But you can't just look at them. Figure out which questions you can answer easily and use your pen to indicate those. Which questions is going to be a little bit more tricky, and which of the questions want your opinion? Remember, those are the open-ended questions. So take your pen up and really analyze your questions. I would love you to underline your question word. In other words, tell you exactly what is asked of you, and then encircle the key word or the idea. Remember, every question has a question word. For example, explain or state or discuss. And then there's a key word or idea. Exactly what do you need to explain? What do you need to discuss? So take your pen up and underline and encircle. Now, step number 3. Now we're going back to the passage again for a second reading. Please make sure you've got a pen or your highlighter in your hand. I need you to make notes as you go. Remember, that article and that question paper is for you to work on. You can scratch on it. Please do so. So as you read, indicate where you find a possible answer. Remember, you know now what the questions are. So as you're reading for the third time, you might pick up to say, I think this is a possible answer. If you find a word that's not familiar to you, underline them. Look out for joining words. Remember we did conjunctions? Now, look for these words and encircle them because they might show linking between paragraphs or even a contrast. Is it possible for you to summarize every paragraph in your own words? Or write down the main idea? Then do it. Can you see, reading is not sitting back and just reading. You need to work actively while you're reading. So, let's get ready to answer those questions. The questions will start at the beginning of a text and move through the rest of a text in sequence. We will refer you to a specific paragraph if need be. Make sure you go to that paragraph or line that we've suggested and just reread it once again. Very important. You need to look at the mark allocation. That means how much a question is. And that will tell you exactly how much you need to write. It's usually 1 fact per mark. But be careful. You can rather write too much than too little. So let's focus on specific questions and how to answer specific questions. We love asking you, why is the following statement false? Now, if you get a question like this, you just go back there. Remember, we will give you a statement. You need to explain to us why the statement is incorrect. In other words, you have to give us the right answer. Be careful. Never quote unless you are asked to quote. If you are asked to quote, remember to use inverted commas. You might be asked to quote what we call consecutive words. Consecutive words means words after each other. You will be required to quote a specific number of words. Please count your words to make sure you have the right number of words. Another kind of question we love to ask you is when we ask state 2 points or give 2 points or state 2 ways. Now remember, if we do this, we want 2 very distinct facts. So please show me 2 very different facts. But be careful. Look at question number 3. List 2 ways. This question is a bit different. If you look at that one with regard to question 2, you see the format is different. In question 3, we want the facts underneath each other, like a shopping list. Obviously, when you make a shopping list, you don't write each other next to each other. You write it underneath each other. So if I ask you to list something, I want fact 1 and then underneath it fact 2. But if I ask you to state 2 points, then you'll give me 2 separate points. Those you can write next to each other. Please make sure that you write in your own words. That's important. Now, multiple choice. Multiple choice can sometimes be quite tricky. I need you to take the list of options and eliminate the ones you know is definitely wrong until you find the correct answer. If you are asked to illustrate, you need to give us an example, not a picture. I know it sounds like you have to draw something, but you shouldn't. Just give us an example. Please remember, if you need to compare 2 things, make sure you give the differences and the similarities. We need to see both. Describe Well, it's like my little picture. You are a star, so you need to describe that. Now, let's do a bit more tricky questions. Explain in your own words or using your own words, or explain why, or suggest reasons. So if you get things like that, here's to answer them. Go back to your text. Make sure you know exactly which paragraph or line they're referring to. Read it carefully. You're not allowed to use the writer's words directly because it's said clearly using your own words. So rewrite it, but don't change the meaning of the sentences or the paragraphs. Right. Go one step further and give me evidence why you say something. Really important. Very important, always use full sentences. Don't start your sentence with because. Always make sure you use full sentences. If you are asked to discuss, for example, if it's appropriate or discuss the title, then you have to refer to the title and the content. Can you see now we're getting to more difficult kind of questions? If we ask you to, do you agree or do you think? Remember, substantiate means you have to give us reasons. Look at the mark allocation to see how many reasons we actually need. And then obviously, best way to do this, and I'm sure you know this, is the peel method. Give me your point. In other words, tell me on which side are you on, yes or no? And then you explain why you chose this side. You can even give me an example to prove your point. And then lastly, make sure you link it back to your question. That's what we call the peel method. And I'm sure your educators have shown you this. Now, visual text, that's part of your comprehension text B, can either be an advertisement, a cartoon, a graph, or even an infographic for that matter. So how do you answer these ones? Step 1. Ask yourself these questions. What kind of text is this? So you have to be able to identify whether it's a cartoon or a graph or an infographic. What kind of information is it showing? Are there pictures and words or only pictures? And what's the connection between the pictures and the words? It's very similar to our cartoon and our advertisement, isn't it? Step 2. Read your words, link them to the picture. Now, the words can be anywhere. In your heading, below the picture, either or any. Look at your picture again. How do the picture support the words? And then step number 3, now you can read the questions. So it's really important for you before you just jump into the deep end, into those questions. Like first, sure, you analyze the text, that you know exactly what it is about before you start answering questions. I've got a few last tips for you. Use your time wisely. Manage your time. You have enough, you know that. Read your questions carefully. You need to know exactly what to do. Look at the mark allocation. And then, when you've completed your paper, go back. Make sure you've answered all the questions. Have you responded to what is asked? Have you numbered correctly? Did you follow the instructions of a summary? Are you happy with your work? I want to wish you all of the very best. Study hard I know you can do this. Thank you for watching this lesson. See you next time. And I want to give a big shout out to my guys in the technical studio helping me. Thank you and goodbye.